that what we're being told is erroneous science that is being skewed. I'm not sure that people are willing to consider that we may encounter and be alive for an ice age that's coming, because when you even think about it, it brings about an ancient feeling, an ancient reference that ice ages happened to people in the past, not to us, not with modern technology. There's a whole psyche to thinking about this. It's part of what was. It's not part of the modern Earth that's all technology based, that's into nanotechnology, that can do wars in space, that things can happen very quickly, They have Ray Kurzweil talking about the singularity is here and the singularity has arrived and everything's coming into an exponential speed. So I think with the focus being on the internet and the focus on a digital economy, even though the original economy is imploding and the banking system is imploding. I did a show on that with Ellen Brown a few weeks ago. The fact is that most humans, they can comprehend hurricanes, they can comprehend floods, they can comprehend bad weather, they can comprehend some parts of extreme weather. But when you talk about the whole gestalt of weather and climate and the possibility that changes are coming that we do not and cannot control, that are more powerful than what woman can do anything about, a lot of people will feel hopeless and will feel afraid because it will change the face of how to prepare. The preparations for an erroneous global warming construct are different than the preparations for a pending ice age. Totally.
Absolutely.
Including where you're going to buy property, where you're going to set up shop for the next 10, 20 years. Am I correct, Bob Felix? Tell me.
Absolutely. First I'd like to say the IPCC, I think those initials stand for Irresponsible Political Climate Cover-Up. With that said, yes, we're being prepared for global warming. I think if people knew the truth, you asked what could happen in the future, I think if we knew the truth, that we could handle this. I mean, if you put me on a plane to Alaska and you tell me in advance that I'm going to Alaska, I'll figure out what to do. And people will figure out what to do. But if you put me on a plane, tell me I'm going to Miami, and I prepare for Miami, and then you dump me off in Alaska, I'm in a heap of trouble. And I think that's what's happening right now. We're being told it's global warming, we're being told we're going to Miami, and we're headed in the opposite direction. So tell us the truth, and people will figure out what to do.
I think that people will figure out what to do, but I think they're going to need whole systems guidance on how to even begin formulating the right questions. For example, if you want to talk about insulation for your home or for a property, and you're not thinking of geomagnetic storms, or you're not thinking of tremendous amounts of ice coming, you're preparing totally for the wrong thing. And no matter how much you green your environment, quote, end quote, no matter how much you do organic and you make your materials from everything natural, it won't work to support wrong assumptions.
I keep hearing this talk about the rising sea levels, and I see it going in the other direction. During the last ice age, sea levels were 370 feet lower than they are right now. That's where all the moisture came from to build up those ice sheets 2 miles thick, covering Canada, covering parts of the United States. But one thing I'd like to leave with people, too, is that just because we're in an ice age doesn't mean it's going to be that much colder.
See, that's what we don't understand.
No, people don't understand that. During the last ice age, Seattle was covered with 4,000 feet of ice, 4/5 of a mile straight up. But the ice only extended as far south as Olympia. 150 miles south of Olympia, it was only about 7 degrees colder than it is right now. The ice then, and I do have a map of this on iceagenow.com, but the ice then moved north so that Coeur d'Alene, Idaho was not covered with ice. Then the ice essentially followed the Missouri River. So on the north side of the Missouri River, there was a cliff of ice 15 stories high. But on the south side of the Missouri River, people could have survived. In my past, I've lived in Juneau, Alaska, just a quarter mile in front of the Mendenhall Glacier. No problem. We can live in conjunction with that, but we would have to change our planting habits. There would have to be lots more farms developed further south.
Would planting need to happen through things like hydroponic?
I would think that would be good. I think greenhouses will be like gold. And the climate changes at that point, like in the American Southwest during an ice age, at least during the previous ice age, it was a lot wetter, so things would have grown better. So there's a lot of things that we could be looking at and preparing for.
What do you think's going to happen with Canada, Bob?
Well, can I answer that as a Canadian?
Sure.
You Americans better stand by for 38 million Canadians moving south. That's the threat, and we'll bring our healthcare system with us too. Watch out. But I think that there's an important point to make here, a couple of important points. One is, you mentioned the term extreme weather. It's not extreme weather. Hurricanes are normal weather.
Okay.
It's just that they are problematic for humans, or if your house is in the way, and so you watch it on CNN now. They have severe weather.
I think that's just for
normal weather. Yeah. So that's the first thing. The second thing is all of the focus, and I agree, it's fine. I agree with what Bob is doing. The focus is on temperature, but we've also hinted, and I talked about it with snow on glaciers. What's the precipitation going to do? They're telling us, there's going to be more droughts. Well, that's counterintuitive, because if it warms up, there's more water vapor in the atmosphere and the potential for more rain, not less. But they know that droughts, and I taught a water resources class because I realized from studying climate that drought is the single biggest impact on flora and fauna and the human condition. And so what's the precipitation going to do? That will have as big an impact as the temperature change. And of course, as Bob is saying, that you simply, things will, areas that currently can't produce will in fact be able to produce foodstuffs and those kinds of adjustments. Now, how that will be affected by boundaries and nation states and so on is another matter. But I think that there's a couple of important things here. One is, of course, the immediate consequence of the policies that are coming out of the carbon being the problem, or CO2 being the problem, and how that's going to destroy Western economies particularly. Clearly, China's not going to go along with it, and neither is India. And India have trumped the environmentalists by saying, look, we've got people starving to death. We want to get our priorities straight here. And so you'll see a huge change in the balance of power within the world. That's the first thing in a short basis. But I think in a longer term, as it cools down, the food production becomes a big problem. And as Bob talked about with that little ice age in Britain and Europe, I mean, the harvest failures and the difficulties that it created, and of course, so much of the migration of the Caucasian people, the Europeans, to North America came about because of those severe conditions in Europe at that time. It wasn't just the political. The political unrest was due to food supply problems, but the response was the migration, and so I think we're likely to see a lot of those things. But we've got such a rigid system in place that whether we can accommodate them is another question.
You talked about the mass migration. There's a cycle. I've been talking about the big cycle of ice ages, but there's a smaller cycle of little ice ages, which essentially correlate with the sunspot cycle, a little ice age approximately every 360 years. The collapse of civilizations matched the little ice age cycle. The Sumerian civilization collapsed in sync with the little ice age cycle. The Roman civilization collapsed in sync with that cycle. The Greek civilization collapsed in sync with that cycle. Genghis Khan swept out of the north in sync with that little cycle, that little ice age cycle. And I fear that we're going to be seeing the collapse of modern-day civilizations in sync with that same cycle.
I would point out that we had a mini migration in the 1960s and 70s when we had some very cold weather and cold winters to the southern part of the United States. The population of places in Georgia and Florida increased rapidly at the expense of northern states. And the public is prepared for global warming, as you said, and they're being told that they have to watch out for more heat waves. The heat waves are increasing. And the actual fact is if you look at the data, we've had less heat records in this decade, the 2000s, and it's coming close to ending, than any decade since the 1800s. It isn't there.